As a foreigner moving to another country, what should I bring to that country and what should I contribute when I arrive there? It's a question that I've asked myself a lot since being on my travels. But when I thought about it, I realised that I've asked the question countless thousands of times, not directed towards myself, but in a previous life when I've lived in a couple of countries that have seen waves of people arriving there, foreigners who have decided to move there from different countries. I've often looked at people moving to those places and asked, well, what are you bringing to that country? What are you contributing? Have you asked that question of yourself? I think it's an entirely reasonable question to pose. And now the boot's on the other foot. Now it's for me to ask the question of myself because now I'm the foreigner. So it's entirely reasonable that I ask this question. I think it's reasonable for anyone to ask the question, how are they contributing to the country that they've moved to? But there's a lot of people who will have no interest in that question and they'll say, look, I'm bringing my suitcases and my PlayStation, whatever else I'm into, and that's pretty much as far as I go in terms of really considering the issue. Well, that's fine, but I would say that it doesn't matter whether you are interested in this question or not. It rains on all of us. And the reality is that if you look around the world, you can see several situations where there have been large influxes of people who have moved to different countries and things are not turning out quite as they would have hoped. Now, it's impossible to go into each of those circumstances, and I'm sure there's a lot of other issues and politics underlying why things seem to be going sideways in different countries where a lot of foreigners have moved to. But I do believe that at least in some of the cases, it's quite clear that there's been an issue with perception, and that is the way that those foreigners have moved to that country and how people who live there are perceiving them. And when you look at the offerings on social media, YouTube and other forums where the foreigner community who are moving to Paraguay are having a lot of their dialogue, you see countless videos and discussions often emanating from the various expat, nomad, guru, rock stars who are selling Paraguay and other countries for the features and benefits that they offer to potential investors. Often these people don't even live in the country, but they know everything about this country and seems just about every other country, and a lot of people follow these people. So what you see is, in places like Paraguay, many plane loads of followers of these people arrive with long lists of requirements of Paraguay must have this and it must have that and it must fulfill these specifications. Now, that in and of itself is fine. We all go to a country with a set of requirements, a checklist that we want fulfilled. We certainly did, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. But I do just take note of the fact that it seems to be just a never-ending list of what the country can do for them. And amongst all those videos are the all too frequent videos from some dog ugly foreigner guy who couldn't get a date in a dried fruit factory, but nevertheless he's got some glam supermodel looking Paraguayan lady hanging off his shoulder, and he's coaching people about how easy it is to get a date in Paraguay and find a gorgeous wife. Well, again, this video is addressing the question of what can we contribute to the country, but I also want to ask, in amongst all that, what are the perceptions of what we're contributing, or in this case, perhaps not contributing? Now, I would contend that if I were a Paraguayan and I came across such a video, I wouldn't be all that impressed. And if I happen to meet that person, we might even have an animated conversation, because my daughter or wife or sister isn't someone that's just here to just waiting for some bald, ugly foreigner to come along and brag about how easy it is to get a date with them. But maybe I'm just old-fashioned. But nonetheless, we do need to reflect on how I think we're being perceived in the country that we've calling home, because there is clearly in other countries examples of how these particular dynamics have played out, and there's nothing good coming from it. What is the benefit for this country when it comes to foreigners moving here? And on the odd occasion, I've had quite animated comments made on our videos about that. I always respond by pointing out that Paraguay over many, many years has enjoyed great benefits from foreigners moving here. We have an amazing hospital not too far from here that's funded by the Mennonite churches and mostly German doctors, and it's an absolute asset. It is invaluable to this community. And it's only there because those communities of foreigners that have moved here, and I don't know, maybe funding from further afield, but it all contributes to this amazing facility. In addition to that, you have various industries here that have clearly benefited from the expertise and knowledge and financial resources of foreigners. So in total, I would suspect that if someone was to push a button and foreigners were to disappear in a place like Paraguay, it would be a disaster. And in addition to that, you've got a lot of day-to-day commerce here. You have a tremendous amount of building and development in various parts of the country that's fueled by foreigners and their capital. So again, all of that industry contributes to the well-being of the country. So there are some tremendous tangible benefits to having foreigners living here in Paraguay. But nevertheless, the question is being asked, and from what I can glean, I think increasingly so, what are the benefits? So I think we always need to be in a position where we can at least offer some degree of counterbalance to the discussion. But when it comes to people like the Mennonites and other groups who have come here and done some great things, I think it's fair and reasonable for us to also accept that perhaps they made the plate spin, but we've got to keep it spinning. We've got to find ways to keep the momentum of the positive sentiment that has come from these groups, because if you were just to take a cursory glance of the commentary that's online, I would argue that a lot of it just seems to be, I want, we want, it must have. And there are things like the tax benefits and the cheap this and that and all of the other things that are rightfully appreciated by people coming here. But if we're not careful, if people hop on to the megaphone of social media and they don't really consider the bigger picture, we could possibly fall into the trap of some of the other countries where people are looking only at one aspect of the equation. And we really want to do everything we can to avoid that. But it's not always that simple to do what would be perceived good things in a place like Paraguay. Let me explain. There's been a few times where I've tried to get certain projects off the ground in the places where I'm living. And I won't go into too much detail, but they were essentially projects that would provide some benefit to a certain segment of the community here. But what was interesting was every time I tried to get this particular project off the ground, the people who I was talking to about it would invariably say, oh, look, great idea, but we need to speak to so-and-so. And it would usually be someone in a position of authority. When it is elevated to that level, it becomes apparently and seemingly really positive and fruitful. But on more than one occasion, I found that after that discussion, it seems that the person that had the ultimate say assessed the project on the basis of how it suited or benefited them rather than perhaps the people that we were trying to help. Now, I'm not saying that's something that happens here all the time, but it does seem to me that in Paraguay, at least in my experiences, when you try and get something done, it often gets sort of directed upwards and towards a person in a position of official authority. And that's when bureaucracy can sometimes weave its magic and frustrate the process. But that's not to say that you can't get things done here, because although there's a lot of bureaucracy here, there's, on the other hand, not a lot of comparative red tape. And you'd think they're the same things, but I would argue they're not. Bureaucracy to me is just like machinations, don't really go anywhere. They're just cogs that keep going around until people get tired and worn out. Whereas red tape are, you know, your Poindexters with your clipboards who say for 1,000 reasons you can't do this and that. Thankfully, in this country, you don't have so much of that. So if someone was looking to do something positive in the community, I would think that perhaps a way that might be more productive might be to just try and do it from a grassroots level rather than trying to get things done in an authoritatively acceptable way. Just to say that it's not always as simple as it sounds. So there's other ways I think that we can show that we are of benefit to the country. And sometimes it doesn't have to be anything particularly grandiose. Say, for example, my friend Nico, he's got his bamboo initiative. Now, he runs a business through that. He's making things and offering services and consultation for his bamboo services. But he's also on a mission because Paraguay is a deforested country. The materials here are very expensive when you compare it to the wages, and over time that's going to only get more so. So he is raising awareness that the country's got one of the premier species of bamboo in the world. There's a social good that he's doing on a tremendous scale if you can really get a gallop on. And for our part, we're just promoting his courses. Hopefully more foreigners will sign up and attend. We've got one coming up this week. That's not what this video is about, but I'm just saying that this is something we've kind of become involved in. But there's also things as simple as the way that you proceed in the place where you settle. If you buy a property of any size, it's definitely a good idea to be quite sensitive about the way that you go about your business. For example, I know of one situation where some people bought quite a sizable bit of land, and they really took some time to get to know the people around and assess how that land had been accessed and used and regarded by the locals. So in time, they've incorporated the locals into their business, and I believe they've even formed some sort of property ownership model with some of their employees for some of the land. The point I'm making is that these people didn't just go and buy a piece of land, build a big fence or wall, and just disregard what was going on in the community. They really thought about the broader picture and how they were being perceived. And the net benefit is that their business is now really benefiting because there's a real spirit of harmony in that community. They're perceived really well there. They brought a very significant social good. But you see, on the other hand, sometimes people move to a situation like that and without a second thought, put up a big wall or fence. But what they perhaps haven't really considered is that those tracks through there are the tracks of locals who have always used that thoroughfare to get to their other paddock where they've got their cows or where the stream is, whatever it is. And I'm not saying you necessarily build footpaths for people through your property and just be a laydown, but you have to at least consider the impact that you're going to have in this new place. And that's why I say that I often think it's better when you're looking at a rural property if there's some sort of structure that was historically on it, so at least there's some precedent. Whatever it is, you've just got to be sensitive to how you're impacting the place in which you're coming into, because it's not about touchy-feely, because there's a real tangible benefit to being on good terms with your neighbours and the general community around where you are. So that's a bit to think about. As I've said, I'm not trying to virtue signal in any way. This is a question that we all have to grapple with and just think about how we're projecting ourselves to this community and how others in our foreigner community are doing, because as I've said, it rains on all of us. And if we have people who are perhaps bringing people who are coming here into disrepute or showing foreigners to be just single-minded and pretty much only interested in what they can get out of the place, well, that's not in any of our best interest. And I just hope and encourage that we can steer the conversation and the consideration of what we can do in this place in a positive way, so that we don't have to encounter the same sort of social upheavals and issues that have happened in several other countries, because those things, unfortunately, can be just under the surface in any country. And as this crazy world turns, who knows what goes on. We can see a wind change here. There's, I guess, some sentiments and ways of thinking that seem to be more from the places that we've come from. So things are changing here, but slowly. But with everything that we know and what we've seen and the way that we've seen things so manipulated and kind of skewed in the countries that we've come from, I think we really should take the opportunity with that knowledge to try and craft the best outcomes for us here in respect to the way that we embed ourselves into the fabric of the society and how we're received. I don't know, just things to ponder. No real clear answers, just, I guess, some talking points. Just want to generate some discussion, some thought, and maybe even some actions from people out there that might be thinking about doing something that might project favourably on all of us. And just with that in mind, if there are any people or groups of people out there who are in Paraguay, foreigners who have moved here, who have got things going that are positive or interesting, or initiatives that might be able to be replicated or somehow repeated in other parts of the country, please feel free to contact me. I'll be really delighted to meet anyone that's running any sort of thing that would be cool to cover, and we're always really happy to promote anything that's of benefit to everyone, because there's no new frontier, we've got to make it here, as the song goes. I just think that we have got such a great opportunity in one of the last few remaining sane countries, and hopefully we can keep it that way and always be welcome and appreciated for what we bring. Here's hoping. So until next time, take care. Ciao.
Smoking